No one in Ashford County could explain how two men vanished with $7 million in cash, or how their trail led to a pair of burning cars and a mystery that refused to die. It began on the morning of June 14th, 1975, when the sun had barely risen over the quiet streets of Ashford, a small industrial town in northern Illinois. The Ashford National Bank opened its doors at 9 a.m., like it had every Saturday for the last 20 years. By 9:18, the building was filled with the echo of gunfire, the screams of tellers, and the sound of two masked men ordering everyone to the floor. Witnesses would later describe them as calm, precise, almost professional. They carried sawed-off shotguns and wore dark blue coveralls with no markings. One of them, later nicknamed the driver, barked instructions, while the other, called Red Mask and police files, stuffed the cash into heavy duffel bags. The entire robbery lasted 2 minutes and 47 seconds. The men left no fingerprints, no blood, no drop casings. They walked out to a black 1973 Pontiac GTO waiting at the curb, and within seconds, they were gone. At 9:22, Officer John Keller reported a black GTO speeding down Route 19 toward the old quarry road. Keller gave chase, calling in the pursuit over the radio. His dash report, found years later, noted vehicle swerving eastbound, high speed, possible driver wearing gloves. Passenger looking back repeatedly. 2 other patrol cars joined the chase. The suspects disappeared into the back roads leading toward Pine Hollow Forest. Minutes later, smoke rose from a ridge near the quarry. When officers arrived, they found the GTO engulfed in flames. No bodies, no feedbacks, just the charred frame of the car and melted metal on the asphalt. Detective Samuel Crane, a 38-year-old investigator known for his methodical habits, was assigned to the case. He described the scene as too clean. The fire, he said, looked staged. Accelerant traces were found, but the burn pattern suggested timing precision. They wanted us to believe they died, Crane told local reporters. And they almost pulled it off. But almost became the word that haunted Ashford for years. By evening, roadblocks stretched across the county, and helicopters scanned the forest. Bloodhounds caught a faint trail leading north toward an abandoned railway line. There, investigators found tire tracks. A second vehicle had been waiting. The make was unclear, but one distinctive pattern on the soil matched a Goodyear radial used on 1974 Ford vans. The assumption was immediate: an accomplice. The getaway was planned down to the minute. Inside the bank, forensics recovered a single partial fingerprint from the back of a teller's counter. It didn't match anyone in the state database. Cameras caught blurred images of the men, but one frame, captured at 9 hours 19 minutes and 4 seconds, showed a patch of red cloth under one robber's sleeve. A witness later said he had a southern accent, something like Georgia or the Carolinas. The stolen sum, $7 million in unmarked cash, was the largest bank robbery in the Midwest at the time. Ashford froze. Rumors spread that the robbers were ex-military, maybe even part of a security firm. Others whispered that it was an inside job that someone in the bank had known. By July, the FBI joined the case. Agent Robert Lang, a young investigator with a reputation for catching fraud rings, became Crane's federal counterpart. Their partnership was tense. Crane believed in local leads. Lang wanted to follow money trails. If they took that much, Lang said during one recorded briefing, they didn't vanish, they invested. But nothing surfaced. No large cash movements, no offshore deposits, no sightings. For months, every lead collapsed. Then, in September 1975, a truck driver named Walter Briggs reported seeing 2 men at a gas station near Davenport, Iowa, driving a white van with mismatched plates. They paid in fresh $100 bills, Briggs recalled. Crisp, like from the bank. By the time police checked the area, the van was gone. Archive, witness statement, September 19th, 1975. The taller one said something about heading south. The other told him, "We'll make it to the lake." The phrase "the lake" obsessed Crane. Within weeks, dive teams searched Lake Belmore, a reservoir 20 miles from Ashford. They found nothing. But divers noted a submerged road leading to an old pump station decommissioned since 1962. In October, Crane received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a Polaroid, a man resembling Red Mask sitting in a diner with today's newspaper on the counter, dated September 30th, 1975. On the back, in neat cursive, it read, "You're looking in the wrong direction." The photo appeared genuine. It was mailed from St. Louis, Missouri. But fingerprints on the envelope belonged to a postal clerk. Crane and Lang drove to St. Louis, questioning motel owners, diners, mechanics. No one remembered seeing the man. The case cooled by winter. Local papers called it the ghost heist. The bank replaced its staff, the insurance paid out, and the town slowly moved on. But Crane didn't. Every year, he revisited the files. He stored them in a gray cabinet labeled A75. Over the years, his notes filled hundreds of pages, hand-drawn maps, witness sketches, phone records. "They're alive," he wrote in 1978. "And they're waiting." In late 1982, something resurfaced. A retired ranger named Albert Hensley contacted the police after finding an old license plate in a drainage ditch near the quarry road. The plate number matched the Pontiac GTO. Rusted, yes, but on the back was a faded sticker from 1977. That meant the car had been re-registered 2 years after the explosion. Someone had used its identity. Lang, now working in Chicago, returned to Ashford. Together with Crane, they reopened the file. They started with financial records. In March 1983, they found a small company in New Orleans, Bayline Logistics, registered under the name Earl Dixon. The company moved construction materials, but had no physical office. Bank statements showed large cash deposits in 1976 and 1977, always under $10,000, structured to avoid federal reporting. The handwriting on one of the forms matched a note found in the Ashford file. When agents arrived at the listed address, a warehouse near the river, it was empty. Just a lingering smell of motor oil and cigarette smoke. And there, on the floor under a pile of dust, was something familiar, an old duffel bag zipper tag with the Ashford Bank insignia. The bag was gone, but the tag had numbers, July 14th, 75. The robbery date, archive photo, evidence tag, Exhibit 18C, zipper tag, blackened, recovered New Orleans warehouse, March 1983. 2 days later, local fishermen near Bayou St. John found a submerged Ford Econoline van, rusted and half covered in mud. Inside, a skeleton wearing a wristwatch stopped at 3:21. Forensic comparison showed it wasn't either of the original robbers. The skeleton belonged to Victor Hale, a mechanic who'd vanished in 1975, the same year as the heist. Hale had a record, 2 DUIs, minor theft, and 1 conviction for transporting stolen vehicles. The accomplice, Lang muttered when he saw the report. Hale had been the driver of the second vehicle. But if Hale was dead, who killed him, and where were the others? The autopsy revealed a bullet lodged between his ribs. The gun type, .38 caliber. Lang noted something else. The bullet had a factory defect consistent with a small batch of police ammunition issued in Illinois in 1975. That meant someone with access to law enforcement weapons had been involved. Crane's suspicion deepened. The investigation turned inward. A local cop, perhaps, or someone feeding information to the robbers. In April 1983, Crane received another anonymous envelope. Inside was a torn check from the Ashford National Bank, signed by a teller named Helen Price. She had resigned 2 days before the heist and moved to Florida. When they found her, she was living under a new name. Her confession was hesitant. They said no one would get hurt, she whispered during interrogation. "I only told them about the schedule. I didn't know they'd do that." Helen claimed she had met one of the robbers at a roadside diner months earlier, a man named Dale Riker. A charming, quiet type who said he was in transport. The name didn't match any database. He said he'd disappear once it was done. I guess he did. The final twist came on May 12, 1983. A construction crew demolishing a farmhouse outside Baton Rouge uncovered a sealed wooden crate beneath the foundation. Inside was a stack of decayed dollar bills. each with serial numbers matching the stolen Ashford money. The total recovered, $83,000, just over 1% of the total. The rest was gone. But the most chilling discovery wasn't the cash, it was what lay beneath it. Another Polaroid, faded but legible. Two men smiling on a dock, holding fishing rods. One of them was unmistakably Dale Riker. The other, unmistakably Detective Samuel Crane. The photo was dated 1974, 1 year before the heist. Crane denied knowing Riker. "That's not me," he insisted, voice shaking. But the resemblance was undeniable. The room fell silent. Lang stared at him for a long time before saying quietly, "Then who took the picture?" The case exploded once more. Files were reopened. Allegations surfaced. Had Crane been part of the heist from the start? Or had someone framed him, knowing his obsession would shield the truth? As the investigation deepened, Crane disappeared from his home on May 23, 1983. His car was found near Lake Belmore, the same lake he'd searched 8 years earlier. In the glove compartment, police found one final note written in pencil. They never left. They just learned how to hide. His body was never found. The Ashford file was officially closed in August 1983, labeled unsolved. But those who worked the case said the money still moves quietly through shell companies and silent towns. And somewhere in the gaps of history, two ghosts of 1975 are still driving that black Pontiac down a road that never ends. If you want to know what they found 8 years later, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The file marked A75 gathered dust for nearly 2 decades before anyone dared to open it again. In the summer of 2001, a graduate researcher named Emily Carter was cataloging cold case record for the Illinois Historical Crime Archive when she found the Ashford heist dossier. Its metal clips rusted, pages yellowed, and the final entry ending with the disappearance of Detective Samuel Crane. She read through the evidence, each line filled with contradictions, and something about it pulled her in. The photograph of Crane with one of the robbers, the van found in Louisiana, the staged explosion. It didn't feel like a closed case. It felt like the beginning of something buried. Emily reached out to retired Agent Robert Lang, now 75 and living in Arizona. He hadn't spoken publicly about the case in decades, but after 2 phone calls, he agreed to meet her. "It's not a story you finish," Lang told her, voice trembling slightly as they sat in his sun-bleached porch. "It's a story that follows you." He still remembered the last time he saw Crane, how the man's hand shook when he denied knowing Riker. If Crane was innocent, Lang said, then the real criminals made sure no one would believe him. Emily asked if he thought Crane was dead. Lang looked toward the horizon and said quietly, "I think Crane decided to go where they went." That phrase stuck with her. Over the next months, she began tracing everything mentioned in the file: bank records, property deeds, motel registries. Most of the names were dead ends, but one stood out: Bayline Logistics, the fake company tied to the stolen funds. It had been dissolved in 1978, but Emily discovered that its registered mailing address was later reassigned to another entity in 1984, a small import firm in Houston named North Shore Trading. The registered owner was listed as Alan Riker. The name hit her like a jolt. It was too close to Dale Riker, the robber Helen Price had mentioned before. Emily cross-referenced the address. It led to a nondescript warehouse near the shipyards, still active, now owned by a construction supplier. She sent a formal records request. Inside the old registration form scanned by the Texas Commerce Department, she found a signature. It wasn't an exact match for the handwriting in the 1975 bank deposit slips, but it was close enough to raise suspicion. She booked a flight to Houston and met a retired dock foreman named Luis Hernandez who had worked at North Shore in the late 80s. He remembered a quiet, older man who managed deliveries under the name Mr. Crane. "That's what he told us," Luis said. "Always wore gloves, always paid in cash. Drove a white pickup with Illinois plates." Emily froze. Crane had vanished in Illinois in 1983. What if he hadn't died? What if he had gone underground, assuming a new identity tied to the same network he had once investigated? Luis led her to the old warehouse. The air smelled of oil and rust. In a locked cabinet behind the office desk, they found a box of old ledgers. Most were blank, but between 2 pages lay an envelope. Inside was a faded photograph of a lakeside cabin and a short note in block letters. Ashford was never the end. On the back of the photograph was a date, August 12th, 1983, 3 months after Crane's disappearance. The photo showed a dock, trees, and a shadow of 2 men loading something into a boat. The picture quality was poor, but one face, partially obscured, bore a resemblance to Crane. Emily scanned the photo, enlarged it digitally, and noticed a reflection in the water, a second figure, taller, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. A small boat registration number was visible on the hull, LA 3192, Louisiana. The trail led her back to Baton Rouge, to the area where the money had once been found buried. She visited local archives, where she uncovered a report filed in 1984 about an unidentified male body found near the bayou. The body had never been claimed. The report mentioned 2 peculiar details. The victim's hands were missing, and a torn piece of police badge leather was found near the scene. The autopsy notes listed a surgical scar on the left forearm, the same place Crane had an old war injury, as mentioned in his personnel file. Emily sent DNA samples from the preserved remains for analysis. Weeks passed before she received the results. The body was not Crane's. Instead, it matched a man named Alan Riker, born 1942, originally from Georgia, the supposed second robber. Riker had been alive at least until 1984. That meant Crane had either killed him or was with him when he died. The deeper Emily went, the more the story unraveled. She found a small news clipping from a Louisiana paper dated March 1985, unidentified arson at Bayou Warehouse, possible insurance fraud. The address listed was the same as Bayline Logistics' former property. Arson investigators had recovered melted metal safes and partially burned documents, one bearing the faint header, Ashford Holdings. Emily brought this to Lang, who by now followed her findings with a mix of fascination and dread. "You're chasing ghosts," he warned. "They built a maze so that anyone who tried to find the end would get lost." But Emily persisted. In 2002, she received a call from a man claiming to have known Crane. He refused to give his name over the phone, but asked to meet in a diner outside Mobile, Alabama. When she arrived, a man in his 70s sat at the counter, wearing dark glasses and a worn jacket. He introduced himself as Franklin Doyle, a retired private investigator. "I worked a side job for a man calling himself Crane," Doyle said. He was paranoid, kept talking about money that didn't belong to him. Said he couldn't trust anyone, not the feds, not the cops, not even his partner. Doyle produced a small cassette tape wrapped in wax paper. "He gave me this the night he disappeared. Told me if anyone ever came asking about Ashford, I should hand it over." Emily took the tape to a lab and digitized it. The audio was distorted, but fragments were clear. Transcript, Side A, timestamp 023, "They think I'm gone, but I'm still here. Riker wanted to run south, but he made mistakes. I covered them once, I won't again. The money's not lost. It's where it always was. People just stopped looking in the right place." The recording ended with a faint sound of waves and a single phrase whispered under the breath, "Lake Belmore," the same lake where Crane's car had been found in 1983. Emily and local divers returned to the site. Technology had advanced since the 70s. Sonar scans now mapped the lake floor in detail. On the second day, they found something, an object roughly the size of a small sedan, covered in silt and algae. Divers descended. What they surfaced was not a car, but a sealed metal container, corroded but intact. Inside, dozens of waterproof plastic tubes filled with currency, most bills dated 1975. Only a portion of the original $7 million, but proof that Crane had returned there. And among the money, wrapped in cloth, was a badge, Detective Samuel Crane's, polished clean as if intentionally preserved. The discovery reignited national headlines. "The Ashford heist resurfaces after 26 years," read one paper. But the mystery only deepened. Why had Crane hidden the money and his badge together? Theories exploded. Crane had double-crossed his partner, killed Riker, and buried the loot. Others believed he was framed, forced to hide it until the real culprits were gone. Emily, reading the transcripts and watching the divers pull bundles of cash from the lake, couldn't shake the feeling that Crane had never stopped being a detective, that maybe he'd hidden the money not for himself, but to expose who really pulled the strings. Weeks later, forensic analysts found microscopic salt residue on the badge inconsistent with freshwater. That meant the badge had been in the ocean before returning to the lake. A smuggling route, perhaps, or offshore laundering connection. One late night, Emily received an email from an unknown address. It contained no text, only an attachment, an image of the same photograph from a 1983 envelope, the one showing Crane and Riker on the dock. But this time, the digital version had higher resolution. On the left corner, where before there had been blur, now was visible a third figure standing in the background, Agent Robert Lang. She confronted Lang days later. He didn't deny it. "I was there," he said quietly, "before the heist. Riker approached me for information about the bank's delivery routes. I thought he was undercover. Crane vouched for him. Then it all went to hell." Lang admitted that he had met Riker in 1974 during a federal sting against counterfeit operations. Riker had been an informant paid under the table. He wanted out, Lang said. He planned one last score. Crane was supposed to stop him, not join him. But I think Crane thought he could control it. Emily asked why Lang never confessed. He stared at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Because I didn't know who was guilty anymore." 2 weeks after that meeting, Lang was found dead in his home, apparent heart failure. On his desk was a sealed envelope addressed to Emily. Inside were 2 items, a torn photo negative showing the lake, and a handwritten note. "The truth is still there." Under the second dock, Emily returned to Lake Belmore one last time. Divers located an old wooden dock, partly collapsed. Beneath it, buried in mud, they found a metal lockbox. Inside was a stack of documents wrapped in oilcloth. They were old police pay slips and internal memos showing unexplained cash bonuses paid to several Ashford officers in 1975, including the name of the police chief, the same man who had declared the case closed after Crane's disappearance. The file suggested the robbery had been partly orchestrated by insiders who used Riker and Crane as pawns. The plan had spiraled, and when the money went missing, they needed a scapegoat. Crane had discovered the truth and gone into hiding, perhaps still haunted by his own complicity. Emily presented her findings to the Illinois Bureau of Investigation. The case was reopened in 2003 as Ashford Heist Reexamination Unit. Though no charges could be filed, most suspects long dead, the report concluded that at least 4 members of the original police department were involved in facilitating the escape. Public reaction was mixed. Some called Crane a fallen hero, others a traitor who played both sides. But Emily's final report ended with a single haunting line from the recovered tape. They never left. They just learned how to hide. In 2004, while preparing a documentary interview, Emily received one last anonymous letter. It contained a recent photograph of a man in his 70s sitting at a lakeside cafe in Panama. His face was lined, but his eyes unmistakable. It was Samuel Crane. On the back, a message read, "You found what I left. Now, leave it buried." She never released the photo publicly. Instead, she donated all her research to the Ashford Historical Archive, where it remains sealed until 2030. The legend endures. 2 robbers, $7 million, one detective who became part of the crime he chased. Some say Crane still lives by the water, watching every retelling of his story, amused at how the world kept guessing. Others believe the entire mystery was designed to bury something larger, a network of corruption that never truly ended. And every now and then, when the mist rises over Lake Belmore, locals swear they can hear the faint echo of an engine starting somewhere beneath the water, like 2 men still fleeing a crime that refuses to fade. What do you think? Was justice ever served, or did everyone lose in the end? Leave your thoughts in the comments.